time for the 7:20 weather report here this morning on 98 Country. For southern Minnesota, expect partly cloudy, windy conditions again here today. Our high right around 55 degrees. Those winds out of the northwest, 15 to 25 and gusty. And then tomorrow, expecting a partly cloudy sky, high of 57.
Small town America is literally dying on the vine because people are moving more to the city where there's economic opportunity. And out here we have farming and then the spin-off businesses from farming. And you see more and more abandoned farm places where what we're doing with wind energy is we're adding another cash crop that can put a fair amount of money back into our community. And once you put money back into the community like that, it rotates and revolves around several times before it leaves. I mean, the hardware store guy and the grocery store guy and the gas station guy, they all get a piece of the action.
The winds of southwest Minnesota have buffeted, cajoled, and embraced its rural inhabitants for years. Could they also save a small town way of life and at the same time address a global energy crisis?
We're talking about a resource that is now producing about 0.5% or less of the electricity in the United States, and a resource that has the potential to produce 1.5 times the entire U.S. electricity demand. There's massive potential for this technology to scale in the United States. The more we see the advantages of it on an emotional, political, environmental, and economic level, you're going to see it scale.
Wind energy is the fastest growing energy resource in the world. It started here in the U.S., but then we had about a decade of no energy policy at all. So all of the technology and all of the advances were coming out of Denmark and Germany.
The U.S. is not only behind Europe in terms of its adoption of wind, it's behind Europe in terms of its production of wind turbines. I think there's a leadership position that Europe is taking in the wind industry as a producer, and there's an enthusiasm around wind in the communities as consumers.
What would it take for enthusiasm for wind to take hold in rural Minnesota? Ironically, the answer was nuclear waste. In 1994, lawmakers hotly debated whether to allow the state's largest utility to store more nuclear waste at its Prairie Island nuclear plant. They finally agreed to the storage if the utility invested in 550 megawatts of renewable energy. Minnesota's first large-scale investment in wind power was born.
In the past and currently, Minnesota gets a large majority of its energy from outside of Minnesota, and that gives us economic disadvantage, but it also puts us on an energy pathway towards the past. We want to be looking towards the future for a whole bunch of reasons, so that's why we're pushing renewable energy hard. We try, though, to promote what we call community-based wind energy, where farmers could have a value-added investment opportunity, or individuals or community members or cooperatives of those kinds of individuals could come together to own it. So it's not just large corporations coming in and taking over the industry like the oil industry.
Community wind energy is where there's local participation in the ownership of the wind projects, where there's small groups of farmers or local citizens that have pooled their funds and put together the wind project. They have a significant stake in how that energy is owned and operated. This is important because more of the economic benefits can stay local if there's local ownership.
We did some studies early on, and we started looking at this in more detail, thinking, well, what is the difference between community-owned wind and out-of-country ownership? And the results of those studies were that it's someplace between 5 and 10 times the value for a community to own it. Because when we develop a project, we use local contractors as opposed to the others. They mobilize big companies in from somewhere, and they do the construction, and then they leave.
It's not just a large external corporate entity coming into an area and say, I know what you need right over here. You need 100 commercial scale wind turbines, and we'll have all of the Wall Street investors receive all the benefits, and you guys will get, 2% of the gross revenue.
We export about $75 million a year to foreign companies because they come in and they own these wind farms. And so community-based development was standing up and saying, wait a minute, there's another way to develop our natural resources where we can leverage this into long-term economic development and long-term economic viability for our rural communities, which really need it.
The place where Minnesota stands out head and shoulders above everyone else is with community wind and with the local entities owning these projects. More than 25% of the wind energy that's installed in Minnesota today is locally owned. This is a big deal.
This farm, Woodstock, I developed this in '98, and it came online in 1999, and it's 17 of the Vestas V44s. And from this little farm, we produce enough energy for about 3,500 homes a year. I was looking around for a spot to put a wind farm, and so I found this spot that we're on, and this is owned by the Koss family. And when I pulled into their yard and told them what I was thinking about doing, they thought I was a little bit crazy, but they were very amenable to the idea, and they thought it would be great. And I can remember Grandpa Koss just kind of going, yeah, sure, whatever you think. And it was pretty great. And they stuck with me. It took me quite a few years to get through the process at then, because I was literally the first privately owned wind farm that I knew of at that time.
When Dan started looking for land and land lease, it kind of wasn't accepted real well. You know, 15, 18 years ago, people were looking at it, well, is it going to work? But then as it goes and it starts working, now everybody accepted it. So.
I pay them a portion of my land rent. And after a few years of operation, they came up and they said, boy, this works pretty good, doesn't it? I said, yeah, it works good. And so they said, do you think we can do this? And so I thought, you know, I think we can do this. And so I endeavored to talk to the utility about a power contract for a small project, because they just wanted to do a couple machines. They just wanted to supplement and diversify their farm a little bit in this new cash crop. And so we completed the process on theirs, and we installed 2 Micon 750s for them. And that became part of their farming operation.
And they said it would never happen. A farmer would never get towers. Never happen. Well, it went on. It was 1 year, it was 2 years, 3 years. I still didn't get them, but finally we got them. Like I said to Dan, we can't quit now. We got to finish it because, hey, people said I can't do it, I got to do it. So I did it. Well, we got it done, I guess.
Dan Jewell had the knowledge about how to develop the wind project, and he leased their land, but he also shared the knowledge he had with them so that they could put a project together themselves. He would be the first to admit that there's nothing about community wind energy development that's easy. Nothing in this industry is standardized. Whether you want to buy 1 machine or 100 machines, it's very helpful to have somebody who's already developed a wind project or who knows the industry.
Well, now once the towers went up, well, then everybody wanted towers. But before that, they always look at you, it ain't gonna happen, you won't get it, just for the big boys. But once I got it done, now everybody wants them.
I mean, people were lined up on the highway watching us put them up, and a couple of the neighbors that I had talked to were going, hey, are you going to do any more of this, and can you put them on our land? And it just kind of built from that. And then through that process, we learned how to aggregate farmers together into groups, which gives you buying power. And so instead of putting 2 over there and 2 over there and 2 over there, we get those same farmers and small business people together, and we build a larger project in one spot that allows us to take advantages of economies of scale.